August 26th, 1994, San Francisco, United States. It's early morning and two FBI agents are racing through the city streets at breakneck speed. Their target? A Russian woman standing inside a local bank, attempting to withdraw almost $500,000 in cash. The bank teller is stalling, trying to buy time. But this woman isn't an ordinary customer. She's connected to the Russian mafia, and she's the final piece in an elaborate scheme to rob one of America's biggest banks, Citibank. Time is running out for the FBI. They've been waiting for this moment for months. And just seconds before the woman decides to leave, the agents burst through the doors and order her to the ground. At the exact same moment, halfway across the world in Israel, another man using a fake identity is arrested while trying to withdraw a similar amount of money. Something strange is happening. People all over the world are attempting to withdraw millions of dollars every few weeks, and all of these funds are coming straight from Citibank. But here's the problem. Citibank isn't authorizing any of these transactions. Instead, it's a mysterious hacker, someone who's figured out how to rob the bank electronically, someone who will steal millions of dollars, trigger an international manhunt, involve the Russian mafia, and create a mystery that has never been solved to this day. This is the insane story of the Citibank hack, the first cyber heist in history. December 1993. St. Petersburg, Russia. It's late at night when a Russian hacker known only as Arkanoid is reading through a newly released magazine called Frack, issue number 42. Frack was an underground online magazine created for hackers. It discussed new concepts and ideas about hacking, cracking, and various cyber-related topics. But this particular issue didn't just discuss theories. It contained something far more valuable. A list of hundreds of network addresses connected to something called the X.25 network. Now, even though the internet is the dominant network today, back in 1993, X.25 was the leading protocol. Most big corporations used it to connect to various systems, including the Sprint network. The Sprint network allowed businesses to exchange data across long distances at incredibly fast speeds for that time period. And while Frack magazine listed dozens of interesting companies, one stood out above all the rest. Citibank. One of the largest American banks was listed in great detail, but strangely, it didn't have a geographical location like the other companies. This immediately grabbed Arkanoid's attention. He quickly contacted one of his friends to help him infiltrate and explore Citibank's systems. As Arkanoid and his friend navigated through Citibank's network, they encountered someone else. Surprisingly, it was another hacker who, just like them, had read the latest Frack magazine. According to a blog post Arkanoid later wrote himself, everyone was allowed into Citibank's low-level networks. Even more shocking, communication within Citibank's network was possible between different hackers. As a result, Arkanoid, his friend, their new hacker companion, and a bunch of others they met literally inside Citibank's network began forming secret research groups, all with one objective: finding sensitive data and important access points. And that's exactly what they discovered. The team found emails containing login credentials for Citibank's credit and transfer terminals. At this point, the team had their hands on what was essentially a money printing machine. However, nobody wanted to risk everything they'd worked for just to try transferring money into their own accounts. Nobody except one person. One member of Arkanoid's team couldn't resist the temptation. But he understood he couldn't just send money directly to himself. So, this unknown hacker reached out to a few people for help. Only one person agreed to listen. Early 1994. St. Petersburg, Russia. Late at night, the unknown hacker meets a mysterious man known as Mr. Levin. They meet at Levin's apartment and discuss the hacker's findings. Levin, who also has a background in programming, is extremely interested in the information. But instead of working together with the hacker, he wants all the information for himself. He wants to try it alone. The hacker eventually agrees to sell everything to Mr. Levin for a mere $100. After Levin hands over the cash, they dive into the details. The hacker explains the entire operation, the Sprint network, the terminal he needed to connect to, which credentials to use at each access point. Everything. The next day, Levin slowly begins infiltrating the bank's network, following the instructions he received word for word. After a few hours, he finds exactly what he was promised, a terminal actively being used to transfer money. Levin stays hidden in the network, observing what the Citibank employees are doing. Once all activity stops for the day, he seizes the opportunity. He begins typing bank credentials into the system himself. Everything works perfectly. This confirms the information was completely accurate. However, Levin knows he can't just send money to his own bank account. He needs a way to get the money without it leading back to him. Levin, despite being a programmer, has strong connections with a local crime group known as the Tambov Gang. They're notorious for extortion, smuggling, and brutal gang wars over territory. He reaches out to one of his friends in the organization and explains that he has a plan to make him and the gang a significant amount of money. All he needs is for someone to open a new bank account and withdraw the money the next day. No strings attached. July 15th, 1994. Lappeenranta, Finland. Levin's friend calls him and confirms he's ready to withdraw the money. Levin immediately fires up his computer system. While Citibank's employees are sleeping halfway around the world, he executes a transfer of $384,000. The money comes from the accounts of a Uruguayan real estate company and goes straight into his friend's account. Levin quickly calls his partner, confirming that everything appeared to go as expected. Now it's his partner's turn to act. The man, who has no idea what's actually happening behind the scenes, enters the bank and requests the money. However, the teller seems suspicious. A brand new account receiving a massive sum of $384,000? He leaves to speak with the bank manager. A few minutes later, the teller returns with the money. The man signs the receipt, takes the cash, and walks out of the bank carrying a bag full of thousands of dollars. Together with Levin, he just stole almost $500,000 in a matter of minutes. No guns, no violence. It had truly been the perfect heist. But what they didn't know was that only a few hours after they finished celebrating their success, the Uruguayan real estate company alerted Citibank about the missing funds. Citibank quickly discovered the fraudulent transaction. Even though they had no idea how it happened, they immediately contacted the FBI and were prepared to launch one of the most intense manhunts of the 1990s. Late July 1994, New York City, USA. Only a few days after the initial report of the mysterious heist, Citibank's security team, along with several FBI agents, came together with a single mission: find whoever was responsible and prevent any future thefts from occurring. They concluded that the perpetrators were likely still inside the network. This meant they needed to carefully monitor all transactions, even after working hours. One thing was certain: the thieves would strike again, and when they did, the team would be ready. Furthermore, they decided the next fraudulent transaction should be allowed to go through. It would be treated as a honeypot. This way, the FBI could surveil the bank receiving the money and arrest whoever attempted to withdraw the funds. And just as they predicted, another fraudulent transaction was registered only days later. Late July 1994, Buenos Aires, Argentina. Early in the morning, a member of the Tambov gang arrives in Argentina. Immediately after landing, he drives to a local bank and opens a new account. Once he's finished, he calls Levin and provides him with the account details. Levin then starts up his system and initiates a new transaction worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. However, this time, Citibank detects the transaction immediately. They promptly contact both the Argentinian bank and the FBI, who in turn alert the Argentinian authorities. While the FBI is coordinating with Argentinian police, Levin's money courier enters the bank and begins speaking with the teller. But when he requests the funds, he's informed there's a small problem with the account. He'll need to wait a few minutes. The gang member immediately senses something suspicious. He has to decide whether to wait or leave. While he's contemplating his decision, Argentinian police jump into their cars and start racing toward the bank. But once they arrive, the man is gone. Any attempts to locate him prove futile. But somehow he managed to contact Levin, who then realized his scheme had been discovered. This meant he had to elevate his game, and that's exactly what he did. Mid-August 1994, Tel Aviv, Israel. This is Alexios Palidas, a Greek citizen who arrived in Tel Aviv from St. Petersburg a few days ago. He claims to be a tourist, But instead of visiting historical sites, he's spending his time meeting with banks and setting up new accounts. Simultaneously, a woman named Ekaterina Kurolkova is doing the exact same thing in San Francisco. Even though they both came from St. Petersburg, nothing connects them beyond setting up bank accounts. That is, until August 26th. On this day, not one but two suspicious transactions are initiated from Citibank's headquarters. Once again, they're deposited into banks in Israel and San Francisco. A few moments later, Ekaterina attempts to withdraw the money from the bank in San Francisco, but she's told to wait a few minutes. It turns out Citibank has already alerted both banks, and they're stalling her until the FBI arrives. This time, Levin's money courier doesn't escape. She believes the teller and stays at the counter until the FBI bursts through the doors. This marks the first arrest in the case. Meanwhile, the money in Israel hasn't been claimed yet due to the time zone difference. Israeli undercover police are already positioned at the bank when it opens, simply waiting for someone to request the withdrawal. Only minutes after the bank opens its doors, Alexios Palidas walks through the entrance and requests a massive withdrawal of tens of thousands of dollars. However, shortly after making the request, and probably after noticing the bank is filled with undercover agents, the man attempts to flee. This sparks a brief chase with police, but he's quickly apprehended. Surprisingly, he begins cursing at the police in Russian instead of Greek. It turns out Alexios doesn't actually speak Greek. In fact, he isn't even Greek. His entire identity is fake. He's actually a Russian citizen from St. Petersburg named Alexei Lashman. The Israelis quickly notify the FBI of their arrest. The FBI now has two suspects in custody and is on the verge of uncovering the truth about what's really happening. Early September 1994, New York. The first suspect in FBI custody, Ekaterina Kurolkova, is being interrogated by the lead agent on the case, known only as Steve. After explaining the situation to his prisoner, Kurolkova reveals she didn't really know what she was involved in. She also mentions she didn't arrive in the US alone. Her husband, Evgeny Kurolkov, had traveled to San Francisco with her just days earlier. However, for reasons unknown to her, he left the country and told her to withdraw the money once he called. Fortunately for Steve, Kurolkova is so furious with her husband for setting her up that she agrees to cooperate fully. Steve asks if she can persuade Evgeny to cooperate with the FBI. She agrees to try. The following phone call between the married couple allegedly becomes so heated that Ekaterina manages to convince her husband to reveal the name of the operation's leader. She even sets up a three-way call that includes the FBI, Evgeny, and the mastermind. The mastermind's name? Vladimir Levin. A few hours later, this three-way call happens. Evgeny gets Levin to confess to absolutely everything. Even though this is another massive victory for the FBI, there's one serious problem. Evgeny just betrayed everyone. If the Tambov gang finds out, his life will be in extreme danger. Early September 1994, JFK Airport, New York. Early in the morning, Ekaterina's husband, who agreed to further cooperate with the FBI, arrives at JFK Airport in New York. However, for two extremely unexpected reasons, Evgeny isn't allowed to enter the country. Steve, who had been waiting for Evgeny at the airport, sees that he's arrived but is arguing with immigration officers. The FBI agent goes to investigate what's happening. He's hit with a shocking realization. Evgeny, a man who's about to be imprisoned along with his wife, brought their daughter with him. Even worse, neither of them has any visas. Immigration doesn't want to let them into the country. What was supposed to be a simple pickup has turned into an unexpectedly complicated mess. Even though Steve is an FBI agent, the immigration staff insists that Evgeny isn't allowed into the country. He has to leave on the next plane back to Russia. Steve begins arguing heavily with immigration. That is, until he realizes something shocking. The person he's arguing with is actually one of his childhood friends. In a bizarre twist of fate, once both of them realize who they're talking to, Evgeny and his daughter are allowed to enter the country. I know this sounds unbelievable, but Steve gave an interview to Darknet Diaries podcast and confirmed this is what happened. Either way, once Steve gets them into custody, he has to temporarily put both parents in jail and arrange care for their daughter. The child ends up spending considerable time with Steve and other agents in the FBI offices. Luckily for the cooperating family, the FBI manages to quickly get Ekaterina released from jail. They organize an apartment for her and her daughter and even register the child for school. Meanwhile, while Steve and the FBI are taking care of the Korolkov family, Vladimir Levin is getting pressured by the Tambov gang. They force Levin to attempt his biggest transfer to date. September 13th, 1994, Rotterdam, the Netherlands. It's around 9 in the morning. Just before a bank in the center of Rotterdam opens, a $1.5 million transaction hits their system. Seconds later, the phone rings. It's the FBI, stressing to the bank that someone will attempt to withdraw the money soon. Under no circumstances should they release the funds. Moments later, a tall man walks in and asks the teller to withdraw the money. He insists it be done as quickly as possible. However, just seconds after his request, Dutch police enter the building and arrest him. Levin's plan has fallen apart once again, but this time, the stakes are much higher. The Tambov gang, having had enough of Levin's failed schemes, decides it's time to find him and make him pay for setting up their members. Levin now finds himself in an impossible situation, hunted internationally by police and domestically by a ruthless mafia. But what he doesn't know is that it's even worse than he thinks. It turns out the Russian authorities, who are hunting the Tambov gang, have intercepted phone calls between the gang and Levin. They're now also looking for him. After a year of trying to steal millions from Citibank, Levin has ended up in the worst possible situation. He has only one card left to play: hide and escape. March 3rd, 1995, Stansted Airport, London, UK. It's early morning on March 3rd, 1995. Levin is currently on an airplane from St. Petersburg to London. He's traveling to meet a man called Leonid G., an old friend of his mother who agreed to take him in until everything blows over. But what Levin doesn't know is that Russian authorities have discovered he left the country. They alerted the FBI about his flight to the UK. The FBI, in turn, contacted UK law enforcement agencies, who scrambled to reach the airport in time. Around noon, Levin arrives in London. He has none of the $400,000 he initially stole. He's carrying the hope of starting a new life. However, right after he exits the plane, 3 British police officers greet him and take him into custody. At the same time, Steve and several other FBI agents are on their way to Russia. Not only did the authorities alert them of Levin's flight, but they also found all of his equipment. It turns out Levin was working for a computer and software company called Saturn SPB, but apparently he wasn't only working there. He was also using their machines to dial into Citibank's networks. This is finally confirmed by Steve and his team, who analyzed the computers at the St. Petersburg police station. Once they find the data they're looking for, they, quote, never drank so much vodka, unquote, as they did during that night of celebration. As for Levin, he spends 30 months in a British prison before being extradited to the United States. But this isn't where his story ends. To reduce his sentence, he allegedly offers his services to US law enforcement. They accept. However, something doesn't add up. It turns out Levin doesn't really know much about hacking or cracking. Many people question how he could have pulled off something like the Citibank hack. And the story gets even more interesting. Immediately after he's released from prison in 1998, he travels straight to the Czech Republic. Shortly after arriving, he disappears. Nobody knows exactly why, but there are reports of him being murdered in Prague. It turns out that right before Levin escaped to London, he triggered a set of mysterious transactions worth several $1 million. He sent $3.5 million to accounts belonging to a Czech company called Bonaventure Management SA. Furthermore, this company reportedly belonged to one of Levin's friends. Even though some believe they murdered him because the money never arrived, others think the company owner helped Levin obtain a new identity. Either way, one thing is clear. After visiting the Czech Republic in 1998, he vanished from the face of the earth. However, 7 years after he disappeared, his story was reignited by a mysterious blog post on a Russian forum known for their hacking community. The article, written by a hacker who goes by Arkanoid, explains that Levin was just some ordinary guy who bought the secrets from one of the members of his hacking group. The post states that the missing link between Levin's lack of skills and the depth of the hack needed to be explained once and for all. And that missing link? Arkanoid himself and his old hacking team. The article definitely makes sense. Up until then, nobody knew about the full extent of the hack, something the article explained in great detail. Even though Arkanoid's identity remains unknown, some people even believe it could be Levin himself, writing under a pseudonym. Either way, whatever happened to the perpetrator of the first ever cyberbank heist remains unknown. Given the fact that many dangerous people wanted him dead, one can only guess what his final fate truly was. Did Vladimir Levin escape and live under a new identity? Or did the Russian mafia finally catch up with him in Prague? Was the mysterious hacker Arkanoid telling the truth, or was it Levin himself trying to rewrite history? The truth may never be known. If you enjoyed this story about the first cyber heist in history, make sure you subscribe to Real Crime Central and hit that notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into the world's most fascinating crimes. And I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think really happened to Vladimir Levin. Did he escape and start a new life, or did his past finally catch up with him? Let me know your theory in the comments. I read every single one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.